Hi everyone, my name is Quan Nguyen. I'm a research fellow at the School of Information, University of Michigan. And today I'm going to present our work with our colleague Sasha Poquet, Christopher Brooks, and Warren Lee on exploring the homophily of demographics and academic performance using spatial-temporal networks. You can find my contact information and the link to the paper on the slide. So it's been widely known that peer-to-peer interactions play a vital role in shaping college experience. Studies have shown that peer can influence students' academic performance, their choices, career aspirations, as well as physical and emotional well-being. Social network analysis has been a widely used tool in educational research to study this relationship between students. Some common data sources are self-report or traces from online discussion forums. Other less common data sources we can see are course co-enrollment or students' affiliations. So if we take a look at the current state of network analysis in education, then you can observe that most of the SNA studies were conducted within a single classroom or single course. And only a few studies have used repeated measures. And a large part of social interactions occur between students on campus have not been fully explored. So what we have seen is the tip of the iceberg. So we can only capture interactions that occur within the formal educational learning settings, such as classroom, or in courses in which the use of discussion forum are more present. But a large part that we've been missing is the informal educational settings, such as the libraries, the dorms, different buildings, and student associations, and the interactions outside of that classroom. So how do spatial network analysis can inform us? So the assumption behind this is that people who are in close proximity will be more likely to form social connections and vice versa. So for example, students sharing the same dorm, attending the same classes, or going to the same event. So in this paper, we're going to exploring spatial temporal networks through Wi-Fi data on campus. So when users using internet on campus, their information was recorded by the Wi-Fi network, such as user ID, MAC ID, IP address, the location of the Wi-Fi access point on campus, and also the login information, such as the timestamps of when users were connected or disconnected from the Wi-Fi network. Wi-Fi data in education has been used in a few studies previously for visualizing mobility patterns on campus, or to predict users' location, or to correlate between students' time spent on campus and their academic performance, or estimate the students' punctuality for lectures and their engagement. And in this study, we are interested to see how can we infer students' interactions from Wi-Fi data. So a tie exists between users when these two users were connected to the same access point at the same time, which suggests a reasonably close physical proximity, at least at a room level. So in this paper, we explore three research questions. The first one, we want to explore whether there's effective homophily, which is the tendency to interact with people who are similar to themselves in terms of demographics and grades based on the spatial temporal co-occurrences among students. And the second question is we want to explore how does this homophily effect change over time. And the third question, we want to know whether the performance of their peers, of the people who spend a lot of time together on campus, could relate to students' own performance. And our research design consists of a sample of 3,900 freshmen enrolled in 5 large introductory courses in the fall semester of 2018. And 2 datasets were used, the Wi-Fi data and the demographics and grades from the institutional records. So both datasets were anonymized by our central IT staff and were joined using a pseudo key. So no identifiable information were disclosed to the research team. And we also acquired a appropriate IRB approval for this study. So the first step is to compute the overlap between students' mobility patterns on campus. So a tie was inferred when two users sharing the same access point during the same time window, and the tie's weight equal to the total amount of time that these two users are connected to the same access point. So for example, on the screen, you can see the box area is where these two users sharing the same access point in that day. And then we aggregate all the overlaps between two users' mobility patterns over the whole semester to determine the tie's weight. And after doing that, we would get a adjacency matrix, a weighted adjacency matrix between users, where the numbers represent the number of hours that two users sharing the same access point throughout the whole semester. However, a unique feature of Wi-Fi data is that it consists of a lot of noises. So when people cross paths in the hall, or they just maybe attending the same lecture, or just go to the libraries, so all of these would account for the collocation time. So we filter out these noises using a cutoff value of 2 standard deviations above the mean, which is 25 hours. So in other words, if two users spent more than 25 hours together over the whole semester, then we convert this as a binary tie. So after convert the weighted network to a binary network, we use exploring exponential graph modeling to estimate the likelihood of two students being connected or having a tie, given the similarity in the demographic characteristics and course grades. So the result for our first research questions is gender homophily. So on the left-hand side, you can see the composition of gender, which is 50-50 in our sample. The composition of ties in the middle, you can see 38% of the ties occur between different sex, and 62% occur within same sex. And the ergem coefficient for this was 62% of the probability of a tie occur between same-sex friends. With ethnic homophily, you can see the composition again. The majority of them are white, followed by Asians, Hispanic, and so on. And 40% of those ties occur within the same ethnicities, and 60% occur between different ethnicities. So in this case, we did not see the effect of homophily in terms of ethnicities. However, when we look at ethnic minority groups, then we actually see that students who are in ethnic minorities were more likely to form a social ties with other ethnic minority students. And that probability is 54%. We also explored the homophily effect based on family income. So you can see in this case, the majority of our students have family income larger than 200K a year. And if we look at the distribution of tie, the red line represents the perfect homophilous world. And you can see most of the ties concentrated on the top right corner between students who have very high income, but also represents just the majority of our students. So the effect of family income homophily is relatively small, 53%. And we also explore the great homophily effect. So you can see the composition of our students, distribution of GPA are mostly concentrated on A's and B's, and the number of ties concentrated in the bottom left corner, so between A students, between B students, and between A and B students. The probability of that is 55%. So in summary for the research questions, the first one, you can see a strong gender homophily effect, and this could be partly explained by the spatial arrangements for freshmen. So they were sorted into same-sex dorms. We see no evidence of ethnic homophily. So in other words, there's diverse social ties across different ethnicities. However, with ethnic minority students, we're more likely to form a social ties with other ethnic minority students. So for the second research questions, we ran separate ergoms model for each month. And we can see that there's an increasing trend in gender homophily, which is the red bar, over time, whereas the effect of family income or grade homophily remained relatively stable. So the question of grade homophily, whether it could be explained by a social selection process, such as good students will hang out together, or social influence process, my performance affect your performance. To determine that, or to distinguish between that processes, we probably need to collect more data over a longer period of time, such as several semesters. And for the third research questions, we take the GPA of the peer that spent the highest amount of collocated time and correlate that with students' GPA, and also the average GPA of 5 close peers. And we can see a small and positive correlation between the GPA of the students and the GPA of the peers who they spend a lot of time interacting on campus with. So the general implication of our studies in this case, even though it's exploratory, is that we can see how diverse and homophilous our peer-to-peer interactions on campus is. Because the mere presence of structural diversity, such as different groups, does not always guarantee that there will be interactions between these groups. So Wi-Fi data or spatial-temporal networks is a great tool to exploring whether there are actually interactions or diverse interactions between different groups on campus. And we can also see the effect of different educational initiatives, such as diversity initiative or even social distancing measures, on the effect of students' interactions on campus. So how their interactions will change based on these initiatives. And also how their peer interactions will eventually influence students' academic choices and performance when we look at it a more longitudinal period of time over several semesters and several years. And some of the limitations of Wi-Fi data that should be mentioned is that it consists of noisy signals. So when people cross paths in the hall, they're sitting in the libraries together, or they're just eating lunch in the canteen, and that's also included in the noise. Campus Wi-Fi coverage range also might miss movement or interactions outside of campus buildings. So when they're in the park or somewhere moving between buildings. There's also a scenario when people in different rooms but connected to the same access point. So that's also a problem. And there's also ethical concerns with this kind of data because it can be misused for monitoring and tracking purposes or using in an identifiable way. So there's a few newspapers that have picking on that use of surveillance based on Wi-Fi data. So I think it's important to be transparent about the purpose of using such data, the data management plan, how are we going to protect the user's privacy, and go through appropriate IRB process for this sort of studies. So in our future work, we recently got awarded a grant, an internal grant, to study the effect of mobility patterns on reopening campuses. So the question is not when to reopen campuses, but how can we open campuses safely during this pandemic? And how do we know that whatever changes that we are making actually works or actually change how people work and study on campus? And do we have empirical data to support our decisions? So in our project, we are proposing to use Wi-Fi data to estimate the collocation between students or between users. So when users sharing the same physical spaces are connected to the same access point, there's potential chance for transmission. And our project aims to estimate which physical spaces on campus are the most congested, and even at what time of the day, because the the whole goal of public health measure is to minimize the amount of people congested at the same place at the same time. So we want these mobility patterns to evenly distributed throughout the day and throughout different spaces on campus. And we're also interested to explore which students group may be potentially more exposed based on their mobility patterns. And the the whole goal of this project is how can we use data to inform institutions and also individuals to make their own decisions in terms of public health measures or changes in educational activities. And we hope to provide a blueprint for other institutions to make use of their own Wi-Fi data to inform their own strategies during this pandemic. Right. So that was our presentation, and you can find my contact information and the link to the paper on the slide below. Thank you for tuning in, and hope you guys enjoy the conference.